the recipe that we're going to do today, taking these inside, is a blender marmalade recipe. It's kind of like blender jam, blender marmalade, whatever you want to call it. It's got that bitterness of a marmalade, but because we use the blender, it's probably got a little bit more of a texture like a jam. So once we've done all of our picking, I'm going to take you inside and show you how to whip that up. G'day there, it's Rachel here from Bush Edge Homesteading Australia, and that is all the mandarins that my eldest and I just got. He's not going to help me put together the blender jam though, because he's headed up to the barn and all the boys are hanging out up there at the moment. So that leaves me to pull this one together with you guys today. The recipe we're going to use today is this one here, which we kind of interchange what we call it around here. Sometimes we call it blender jam, sometimes we call it blender marmalade. But essentially it's blended up mandarins with water and sugar, and it gives you a product that's kind of tasting like a marmalade, but it's probably got a little bit more of a texture of a jam because we use the blender. But the bonus with this one is it is really, really easy to make and a lot quicker than a lot of marmalade recipes about. Now, the mandarins that we grow here are absolutely perfect for this recipe, because they have quite thin skins and they don't have an awful lot of white pith underneath that skin either. And that means they're not super bitter. They also don't have seeds, and that means when we do go to blend them, you're not getting little crunchy bits of seeds in your blender jam either. So if you can get your hands on a mandarin like this, that is perfect for a recipe like this. The way I'm going to do this recipe today is as a shelf-stable preserve. I'm going to use my steam canner to do that, but if you don't have a steam canner, it is something you can do in a water bath. You could do this using Fowler's method if you do Fowler's preserving. And if you don't do any shelf-stable preserves, it is something that you could do and just pop in the fridge as well, perhaps with just a bit of a smaller batch. Now, back to the recipe and the ratios, it is pretty simple. Essentially what we're going to do is have 1 part mandarins blended up to half a part sugar. And then what we're going to do is add an equal amount of sugar to the fruit and water mixture. Now with my blender, I find one of the easiest things to do is actually add some of the water in here first. And it's handy if you've got one of these blenders that's got some increments on it. What I'm actually going to do is fill it to the 500 ml line with water. And then I know what I need to do is just keep adding mandarins until it blends down and it's up here at the 1500 ml mark. And that's what I'm going to do now. There's our 500 ml of water. Now it doesn't have to be 500 ml when you're doing this. It really is just about those ratios. That's just what works for my blender. So do just keep that in mind. And again, what I'm aiming for is 2 parts puree to 1 part water. I'm just going to pop my mandarins straight in there. And what I'll probably need to do is give it a bit of a whiz. And then I might need to stop and add a little bit more to get it up to that mark. Now, I don't want to puree it up too much. I do want some little chunky bits still in my blender jam. Obviously, if you wanted a really smooth texture, there's no reason you couldn't blend it up more. So what I'm going to do is just grab the spoon and have a bit of a look at what that looks like. Actually, let me bring you in. Probably still is a little bit chunkier than I would like. I might just give it another really quick whiz. That should definitely do it. Now that's whizzed up, I'm just going to pop that in our pot. And I'm just going to keep doing that. I will keep track of the amount though, because I need to know how much volume of this water and puree mixture I have, because that's going to influence how much sugar I ultimately am going to need to add into my pot as well. This is where you'll start to appreciate exactly how quick this one really is. One thing you do need to look out for though is that you're just not adding any stem bits or anything kind of too hard like that. I tend to pull those off, but one of the cool things when we pick these mandarins is that it tends to come off by itself. It's obviously going to be a little bit different though if you are buying from the shops. That one's getting a bit full. Again, good volume there. I am having a little bit of an eye to it. So you can see on the side here, or hopefully you can see on the side here, that's where our 1500 ml mark is. If it was a little bit less, I'd be adding more of the mandarins. And I'm going to go just one more. So that takes it to 4.5 litres of the water and fruit puree. What I now need to do is add an equal amount of sugar into this pot. Now, because I need to use quite a bit of sugar, I am going to use my bulk sugar out of the study today, which thankfully I have very recently topped up because we were all out of our raw sugar. Although this one is a little bit different to what we normally get, so I'm still getting used to the different flavour. What I'm looking to do is measure out an equal amount of sugar to the puree that we've just put in here. So that was 4.5 litres. Using this measuring cup, I'm going to put in 4.5 litres worth by volume of sugar. And finally, last one. And yes, it is a lot of sugar. But compared to some recipes that I've seen, this is actually not too bad. There are some I've seen where you've got like 2, sometimes even 3 times the amount of sugar to your fruit. I've just set this on the stove, and all we really need to do now is give that a decent stir, but also get this heating up. I can feel now that all that sugar that was in there, that was really quite solid when I started stirring this, has dissolved. And that's something you do want to do before you kind of leave this be to bubble away on your stove. In terms of it bubbling away, it does take a little while when you're doing your marmalades. This will probably go for the next 30-40 minutes. I do need it to bubble away long enough and get to a temp where it gets to the gel setting stage. And with this marmalade, I'm not adding any pectins or anything like that for it to set up. It's just a factor of the pectin that's in the fruit. And in a mandarin, there's the pectin that's in the membranes and in that white pith as well. So that's what's actually going to get it to set up. But you do need it to get up to an appropriate temperature with the sugar and kind of bubble away for long enough that you get to that point. Now, later on, I will show you what it looks like when it gets to that gelling point. But yeah, as I said, we're going to have to be a little patient. So I'm just going to leave that be. And every so often I'll come back, give it a stir. As it starts to thicken, it will start to stick a little bit if you're not careful on the bottom of the pot. So I can't completely ignore this. I do need to come and stir it. But yeah, for now, I've a little bit of time to kill, so I might just make a cuppa. Excuse that sound in the background because that is the kettle going, but I did think before I have my cuppa, what I might do is get these mandarins and puree them up, because another really quick way that we preserve a lot of mandarins at this time of year is by pureeing them, and then we can use them in things like our mandarin muffins throughout the year. And to do that, all we really do is whiz them up in the blender and then put them in these silicone molds. I do have another video on the channel on doing that if you want to see how that goes in detail end to end. But that is something I am going to quickly do now with these ones. If you do find your marmalade starts bubbling up too much, that's definitely a good sign you need to back the temperature back a little bit. You also probably see here, it is good if you've got a little bit of freeboard in your pot. So that was why I didn't fill it up too much at the start, because you definitely don't want this bubbling over. It will be a hot, volcanic, sticky mess. So that's a bit more like it now. It's still bubbling away really well, but it's not threatening to boil over anymore. Let me just turn my range hood off for a second so you can hear me. So I was thinking what I'd do is just pull out my candy thermometer, just in case you're the sort of person that does like to use a thermometer when you're cooking, because you can use temp to also ascertain whether you've hit your gel point. And it does have a temperature on here. So it does talk about jelly being 219 Fahrenheit, 104 degrees Celsius. There is a little bit of a range. I think if you go like a degree or so either side, I think if it's over 103 or 218, depending on what part of the world you're from, you get like a softer gel. But if you go a little bit harder, it is a bit more of a firmer gel. But obviously you don't want to go too far with your temperatures, otherwise you'll start making candy, or lollies as we call it here in Australia. Okay, this is looking a little bit shinier now. That is one of the signs I often see when it is getting to that stage where it's at that gel point. But I will just grab a little bit of this out and just see if it does set up. So I might as well just do it with that. Just gonna pop it on a plate. Now ideally when you do this, you put it on a very cold plate. And the idea is you can kind of tell if it starts setting, because it will start to firm up and gel a bit. When you push, you get a little bit of a skin to it. Now, I will say that's staying a little loose, but I do actually think this is done. I suspect if my plate was a little bit colder, it would be starting to firm up a little bit more, but yeah, to me, that actually looks pretty good. So we're going to start putting that into the jars. Jars wise, I'm doing my normal trick where I've got these with hot water in them at the moment, because the last thing I want to do is put that hot jam into cold jars. Thermal shock will break your glass, so you do want these to be nice and warm if you're going to put hot jam in them. And I have over here taken this off the heat now just to let that cool down a little bit so it's not quite so molten as I'm putting it into the jars. Now, because that is still quite hot, I'm just going to do this 2 at a time to keep those jars nice and warm as I ladle this in. Just using a can funnel so I don't make quite so much of a mess. I do want to make sure you don't get this on you. This will be super, super hot. Now, in terms of the head space on this one, if you are going to be putting it in a steam can or a water bath like I am today, you're looking for a 1/4 of an inch headspace. So not too much for this one. Let's check the headspace on those ones, and that way I can top it up before I move on to the next jars. I'll put a little bit more in that one. And definitely need a little bit more in that one too. That's better. So yeah, it's really not too far from the top with these ones. And as always, we're going to clean off the top. So I did just wet that down a little bit because it is super sticky. And I'm going to put lids on. I've got a couple of different sorts of lids that I'm using today. The regular mason jars that I have here. I've got the 4 jars, but I do also have a wide mouth, and I'm using a Aussie mason for the wide mouth today. Rings on. Ooh, hot, hot, hot. This goes on to finger tight. Ooh. And then those ones can move aside, and I'm going to fill up the rest. I've got a couple of quilted ones today too. I've had these ones now for probably 13 or 14 years. Mason jars can be a little bit of an investment at the start. Well, they weren't quite so bad back when I got set up, but particularly these days they can be quite an investment. But they are a really good jar, and if you look after them, they pretty much can last you for life. Need to not drop them or put hot things into cold jars and vice versa. Well, the bench is a bit of a disaster, and I've got a full canner load worth of jars now. So what I'm going to do is put this into jars to pop into the fridge. Now, I did grab out a couple more jars. These are ones that I use for gifting. They've got the lug lids, which are that sort of style lid there. I'm not going to bother putting those in the canner. I'm actually going to gift those tomorrow. I'm going to take them into work. I'll get the lids on and I'll give them a bit of a quick wash off. So this is what happens when you start rushing, because hubby is behind me and you're ready to make dinner, aren't you? It's all right, I am nearly done, because I'm going to head outside to use the biogas for actually canning those up. Okay. But I should probably clean up the kitchen for you a bit first, eh? All right, I reckon that should do the job for hubby to get in and do dinner, but we're going to take those outside. We're going to use the biogas and we'll steam can them up so they are preserved for the shelf. Yeah, I'm so going to use that husband. He's being funny in the background because he probably thinks you can't see him in the video, but we can, can't we? Anyway, I have just put the marmalade out here in the steam canner. What I'm going to do is start this up now, and we're then going to steam can this one for 10 minutes. It's going to take a little while just to come up to temp. There's a little dial gauge in the top of these, and it actually tells you when it's got to the stage that you start your timer. If this is something that is completely new to you and you want to do shelf-stable preserves, either using something like a steam canner or a water bath as well is another option for high acid foods like we're doing here today with the marmalade. I do have a canning basics series that explains how to do all this sort of stuff. If you want to do low acid foods though, which are things like soups and stews and meats, you can also preserve those up in jars as well and keep those on your shelf, but you do have to use a different piece of kit, which is called a pressure canner. And in that canning basics series, I also talk about how to use that too. So check that out if that is something you want to know a little bit more about. Hopefully this is enough detail for those of you that are already preserving. I just looked at that little bit of footage back. There was a lot more of my family in the background than I expected. Oh, he's being a goose. Anyway, I also thought I'd just show you the biogas here. If you haven't seen our shares on this on the channel before, it is just a gas burner. Actually, let me just move the shroud away so you can see underneath. The gas is flowing, and this is from gas that we actually create here from organics on the property in a system called a home biogas. And yeah, I've got a few videos on the channel if that's something you're also interested in knowing a little bit more about. You don't need to use a biogas though when you're running a steam canner like I am. I'm just using that because that's the gas source that I have here on this property for a gas stove. The one that I have inside is actually electric, and I do find the canner doesn't work as well on my electric stove. I'm sure they work well on some electric stoves, but yeah, it's just not the greatest on mine. I don't have a big enough burner on that one that I have inside, and that's why I like to use the gas out here. With that now getting to temp, I can start the processing time, and for this one here, it's 10 minutes at my altitude. Just cleaning up the dishes, and I thought I'd show you this now because I couldn't get that skin to show you earlier when we were trying to test if this had gelled or not. And now, if I push this, you can see it's kind of sticky and gelling. And that's that texture that I was talking about, that we were looking for. So obviously this is chilled down a lot more now, which is why we get that gelling. But we would have seen that before if we had had a colder plate. I just brought them back inside after that 10-minute processing time. Oh, ping. That's the sound you want to hear. And I'm just going to leave those sitting there. They have gone through the cool down outside. They're going to go through a little bit more of a cool down here. And then I'll transfer them over here with these other jars. So these are the ones that are going to go in the fridge. These are the ones that I'm going to gift. And that was just a little bit extra left over. And hubby and I did just have a little bit of a chat about doing a mandarin glazed chicken tomorrow for dinner. So that's going to be the plan for that one there. Now tomorrow, what I'll probably do is try and put a clip right at the end just to open one of these up and show you the texture when I go to do that. And that way we can see together how it sets up. But until then, that's the end of today and the preserving. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing how to pull this together. And as always, thanks a bunch for joining. Catch you later. I'm doing dinner at the moment. It's a couple of days later. We're actually having mandarin chicken. I'll give you a little peek of it in the oven in a second, but I just wanted to show you the consistency of the marmalade. We have already used a fair bit. You can see I've taken a fair bit out of this one, and that went into that marmalade chicken that we're doing tonight. But we've also used it on some yogurt, particularly when it was warmer that first night. Just kind of pouring it over yogurt is really, really nice while it's still syrupy. I've had it on some toast. It is already going quick because it is a good one. But as I said, I did want to share the texture of this with you. In fact, what I might do is bring you over to the stove just so that I can get it under the light and give you a really good look. All right, I think that's a little bit better now for you. And if we dive in, you can see that there is the texture of our marmalade. So it's not super, super firm. If I had have taken it even further with the temperature, it would have definitely been firmer than that, but that's a really good spreadable consistency. But I can also use that over the top of yogurt like we like to use it as well.